My name is Richard August, and I'll be your host. Our guests are John DeLuca, Executive Director of the DaVinci Center in Providence, and Sharen Gleckman, who is the Vice President of the Board of Directors. Welcome to State of the State.
Thank you.
There are many organizations that in Rhode Island that provide various social services to the communities, and these are sometimes referred to as non-governmental organizations or NGOs. One of these is the DaVinci Center, located at 470 Charles Street in Providence. Mr. DeLuca, please tell our audience something about the center.
The center came to being as a result of some needs in the north end of Providence, which is better known as the Charles Wanscook area. And what we did as a group of people was we responded to the cry that someone should do something about some of the conditions that prevailed. One of them was that there was almost a 30% dropout rate because the center came to fruition when there was a integration program in the city of Providence in the early 70s. And in addition to that, the business areas had 18 of the 35 storefronts were boarded up. The traffic conditions and the parks and recreation were in deteriorating conditions. Some of the housing stock was deteriorating. So people were saying someone should do something. And we looked around and we said, well, maybe we're somebody. And we put together a 501c3 private corporation, and we decided to call it the DaVinci Center. We then initially targeted the young men and women hanging on the street corners with nothing viable to do, no goals in life perhaps, and we started a drop-in center, which worked out very well. And we responded to some of the needs of the school department to work with some of the youth who may have been causing some issues in the schools. We then heard from the Monsignor over at St. Anne's Church, Monsignor DeMeo, who said, hey, can you do something for the seniors? We got about 3,000 seniors living in the area. And so we started the senior program at that point, and we expanded. We were in 3 storefronts, as I mentioned, and we had only 3 part-time workers who were VISTA workers that were given to us by the Action Program out of Washington, D.C. 6 years later, well, first of all, the Community Development Block Grant in 1974 came into being through Congress. And that really was a blessing because we were able to get a $350,000 grant to build an 8,000 square foot building that we now occupy. And with that came a tremendous expansion of our programs so that we could do night classes with education. We had parenting programs, senior meals every day, and so on and so on and so on. Until today, we serve 5,000 persons per year, and in an array of programs. There are 5 basic components, one of them being the senior citizen program. Then we got counseling and education, health, community development, and social work, counseling, education. I mentioned adult education. So that's where we are today.
So is the center accredited by any organizations, national or local?
It's accredited by the Association of Families in Strong Neighborhoods out of Washington, D.C. It was formerly the United Neighborhood Centers of America, and it merged with the national organization. So we are accredited by them, yes.
As a 501c3 organization, a charitable organization, all contributions to the center are tax deductible, right?
That is correct, yes.
And you said, I believe, that the center really started, or the idea for it started in the early 1970s?
Yes, 1972 to be exact.
And you were among the first, or the first person?
Among the first. I was teaching school in Portsmouth as a guidance counselor, and I saw the need. I was born and brought up in the North End, and I saw the need for something to happen in the North End, and it needed some sort of a prime mover, so to speak. So I got the 4 other persons together, an attorney, a businessman, and 2 school teacher and a guidance counselor, and we formed the corporation, with pretty good insight as to what had to be done. Mm-hmm. And we followed some pretty good, the organizational and developmental methodology. And it worked out quite well, as a matter of fact.
Mrs. Gleckman, how many people are on the board of directors?
10.
Are any of them compensated?
No.
They're all volunteers?
They're all volunteers.
You do have some staff that is compensated, though?
The staff, yes.
Okay. And how did you get involved with the center? I understand you're the first woman member of the board. And how did you get involved with the center?
All right, there was a wonderful woman, God rest her soul, who was a social worker in the Providence School Department, which is where I worked. And she had mentioned to me that I should be involved with DaVinci. They needed younger blood. And so I went on an interview with John DeLuca. I liked what it represented, and that's how I got my start with the DaVinci Center for Community Progress.
Now, some NGOs receive funding from the government, sometimes in the form of legislative grants. Now, for example, the Coalition Against Domestic Violence in the state receives $300,000 from the legislature and $223,000 from the judicial budget. That's over $500,000 to that one organization. Does the DaVinci Center receive any such funding?
We do. We have a wide array of sources for our funding, some being government, some being private. We do receive municipal funding, state funding, and federal government funding. Our budget is a mere $350,000 at this point. We've been as high as $1 million, and it all depends on the availability of various programs. For example, when we used to run the welfare to work programs, we would get $300,000 a year just for doing that program. And a lot of these government programs are ephemeral. They disappear after 2 or 3 years. And my board is a very hard-working board under the leadership of Bob Duver, our president and chairman. And we get very busy with doing private fundraisers, such as we have a Community Humanitarian Award dinner that we have every year. And this is the 17th year coming up. And we're honoring Ed Cooley, the coach of Providence College, on May 15th at the Convention Center. We have that. We have a Blythe World Opera coming up in December. We had a golf tournament in September, and so on and so on. We really have a very active 10-member board. Mm-hmm. And we have what we call an honorary board of directors also, who are very good about being supportive of the center. That's to fill the gap between what the government does not provide. And we would prefer to be on our own feet, and not depend on the government, because you really can't depend too much because it dissipates.
When you say government, are you talking about the federal or the state government?
All governments, actually. The city's been pretty good to us as far as stability. The state, some of the money comes and goes, federal grants, what we would call designated grants, sometimes I guess they get a little bit, the legislators will get a little bit defensive about how much they give, because there's always the press looking over their shoulder and so on and so on. And that doesn't always fill the gap the way we would like it to be. It's not as dependable as we would like it to be. But we have some federal money that comes in through what we call the Ticket to Work program. And the philosophy behind that program, as far as Social Security Administration goes, is that we will outreach to persons who are receiving compensation from Social Security Administration on disability. And our goal and their goal is to take persons who are capable of working and putting them into the workforce so that they become not so dependent on payments every month. They actually become taxpayers. And they are able to contribute to the government tax base. We are compensated for every person that we put to work in such a situation. And that's like a pay as we go. There's no set amount of money that they give us every year, but the harder we work and the more people we put to work, the more we get.
But what percentage of your funding is from the government and what percentage from private fundraising or other private sources?
Yeah, it's about 60-40, 60% government and 40% we raise the money on our own. And we like to have fun when we raise money too. We keep the fun in fundraising.
It's a good idea. So the center obviously provides valuable social services to the community in north end of Providence. I guess, do you ever have, or has anyone ever estimated what it would cost if the DaVinci Center would close its doors and the state or the city had to pick up your services?
Yeah, it would be pretty. If we take, for example, if we take a senior citizen who is trying to maintain their independence living in their own home, and our social workers go out into the home and provide an array of services for them that will help them maintain their independence in their home. Now, if that person were to go into a nursing home, for example, long-term care of any kind, assisted living or whatever, it would probably cost the state around $5,000 a month at least. So, you know, if we keep one person out of a nursing home for 1 year, that's $60,000 that the state saves. And I'm constantly using that as an example when we write to the state government and we appeal to them for funding. And we say, this is what we're saving you guys. That's only one person. We managed to keep dozens of people who are on the brink of going into long-term care into their own homes and living independently. And we just say, you know, look at where we are saving you. So we are an investment. If you give us funding, we are an investment. And of course, we always have an open door. Anybody can see what we do. And I think that our record speaks for itself. We're proud of what we do.
Are the records of the DaVinci Center audited by an independent accountant?
They are.
Okay.
Once a year. And then government funding sources can walk in any time, and they do. And we've always come out with a clean bill of health. You know?
Great. Your mission statement reads, and I'm going to quote, "The DaVinci Center consists of a team of professional staff and volunteers dedicated to the preservation of family unity and tradition in a changing neighborhood environment. Within this context, the DaVinci Center stresses the importance of the worth and dignity of each individual community member and seeks to meet the needs of the whole person." It's a very broad statement. Can you boil it down to some specifics when we start talking about the whole person?
Yeah, that's a good question. The DaVinci Center is based on development of the individual. Our motto is to help persons to help themselves. We do not try to have people be dependent upon us. We would rather see them be independent and produce and feel good about themselves by doing so. What we try to do is we believe in the individual, each having a talent. What we usually tell youngsters when they first come into, we have a summer program. It's called the Career Exploration Program. And what we tell the youngsters is that each of us is an individual. Everybody has a different fingerprint. Everybody has different DNA. And so we are individuals. No one ever was like us. There is no one like us now, and there probably will never be anyone like us. And we have each a unique talent to give to the world. And it's up to us to help develop that talent and let you be the best that you can be so that you can, you know, be an asset to society. And we operate on that premise. And it works, and you see people grow and develop some tremendous success stories that we have sometime. If you may, I'll just talk about one of them.
We're about halfway through the show, and I really want to cover some of the other areas that the center is involved in. Your website says that the Housing Development Corporation of the North End, which is located on Charles Street, was established by the center to enhance the quality of living in the area. In particular, it focuses on providing affordable housing to low and moderate income people. The DaVinci Center sponsors first-time homebuyers workshops in conjunction with Rhode Island Housing. Now, this constant reference to neighborhood and community, you could walk away with a sense that this is a very narrowly focused organization focused on specific geographical areas and ethnic groups. Is that unfair, or is it?
Well, it's not a real presentation of what we do. But when we do our annual statistics at the end of the year, we virtually have people from every zip code in the state, and the nearby Massachusetts and Connecticut, believe it or not. And it depends on what program we're running. For example, our first-time home buyers. We do that once a month in conjunction with Rhode Island Housing. And we get between 60 and 80 persons per class. Mm-hmm. And they do come from all over the state. That in particular. When we talk about ethnic groups, for example, when we first started the DaVinci Center, the North End consisted of 74% Italo-American, 10% English, 10% Irish, and the rest were other minorities and so on, very few minorities. And then with the real estate boom in the 80s, things started changing. When investors were coming into the North End and buying multifamily homes that people built for $5,000 and $7,000 and $10,000, people were offering them $50,000 and $60,000 and $75,000 and all the way up the ladder. And most of them took the money and,
why not?
Why not, right? And they headed south where the weather was warmer and whatever they wanted to do. But anyway, as a result, some of the investors found that in order to support the mortgages that they had by buying those houses at escalated prices, they would need much higher rents to support the mortgage. And the only persons that could afford those rents were people that had Section 8 certificates. And so we had an influx, and who were them? The persons that had the Section 8 housing, but most of them were obviously low income, and most of them were minorities.
And to qualify for Section 8, they would have to meet certain low income
Exactly,
requirements.
And that's where the influx of minorities came into the neighborhood. But we adjusted. We started providing English as a second language programs and numerous other programs that targeted the needs of the new ethnic groups that were coming to the neighborhood. They're a tremendous asset. They're beautiful people, families that, people realize everybody's the same, We all want for our families, they want for their families what we want for our families. And the North End's a good, comfortable place to live. Everybody gets along harmoniously. And, we try to instill that, and we try to develop programs that encourage that.
You struck my curiosity chord here when you said people from Massachusetts and Connecticut are coming in for some of these programs. Is that primarily for the first-time home buyers, or other programs attract out-of-staters? Well,
there are. What you find sometimes is that, especially in counseling, people don't want their neighbors to know their business. So they won't go to a community center close to them. They want to go to one that's a little distant, and that's why we do get persons from out of state. And but we also have programs, fundraising programs. For example, we just honored Eva Franke, who was the wife of the late Sergio Franke, and she lives in Stonington, Connecticut, and consequently we attracted a lot of people from Connecticut on that one.
Did they bring their checkbooks?
She's been very gracious. She's been very good to us, and just a wonderful lady. And you know, there are other programs that people reach in. Our housing programs is one of them.
Okay.
But our education programs attract people too.
But you don't get any funding, I would take a wild guess. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the state of Connecticut ain't sending money to the DaVinci Center.
Well, we actually never tried. Maybe you're giving us an idea now.
There we go.
Do that.
The center provides what I call a palette, really, of educational services. Mrs. Gleckman, I know you were a member of the Providence School Department in
Yes,
your
I
career.
worked in human resources and I retired 7 years ago.
Can you tell us about some of these educational services that the center provides?
They help for dropout prevention. They deal with ESL students, different ages, and they're very good with getting good results.
GD.
And GED, high school dropout prevention, GED classes.
The problems of the Providence School Department and school system are very well known now. I don't think it was a surprise to anybody, and I really don't understand why we had to pay Johns Hopkins University to come in and tell us something that everybody has known about for 25 or 30 years. But my question is, the center they're looking to the center to help in preventing school dropouts, and why is a non-government organization being asked to take up the slack? I mean, we spend $19,000 on average for every student in the Providence school system, and the center is being asked to really intervene in these situations?
Well, if I may.
Yeah.
I think that the guidance counselors and the teachers have a humongous challenge. There's just not enough guidance counselors and teachers to go around. What we do is we augment or supplement the school system sometimes. For example, when we had the dropout prevention program, we got a grant from the Ford Foundation of $77,000. And with that, we identified 30 youngsters who were on the brink of dropping out. And there are indicators that determine whether or not a kid is likely to drop out. And we would take a holistic approach with that. And we would have a social worker go into the house and do an environmental assessment. We would do an educational assessment. And we would provide one-on-one tutoring for those youngsters once a week in the evening. And they really blossomed. These youngsters just needed the one-on-one attention that we gave them. And where there were some social problems, we would help correct that. And we must say that approximately 70% of those youngsters that were targeted to drop out graduated high school.
Wow. Does the intervention occur mostly at the high school level, or is that middle school or elementary, or what?
High school.
It was middle school when they first came in.
Okay.
But we would carry them through to high school and graduation. So we would do outreach into the middle schools. And that's when they first were introduced to our program, and then we carried them for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, what's going on at the middle school level is usually a good indicator of whether or not they're going to get through high school.
That's right. Most school departments can identify potential dropouts. The program really worked, and but they don't have enough personnel to go around. Really, it's a very difficult challenge that the school department has. And sometimes the community centers, we're lucky in the city of Providence that we have 11 community centers, one in each neighborhood. And they can be a tremendous asset and supplement to the schools. But, you know, we don't always have that funding anymore. Once again, you know, the Ford Foundation money dried up, and the dropout prevention program went with it.
We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to give you time to tell us about some of the healthcare services that you provide.
Well, what we used to do, see, when we first started the center in 1972, there were 5 doctors that were aged, and they were living in the neighborhood, and they were serving the people for years. Mm-hmm. And they then were on the retirement rolls, and when they started retiring, there was a gap of health services in the neighborhood. So we collaborated with Rhode Island Hospital and with the Visiting Nurses Association to form Primary Care Health. in the DaVinci Center. When we built the building in 1978, we put a health clinic in there. Well, that lasted for 15 years, and then people started catching on and started going outside the neighborhood for their health care. And then when a Lifespan came into existence, Lifespan would rather have those services up at the Miriam Hospital, so they kind of took a lot of the primary care doctors out of the neighborhood. But by that time, most people had their own doctors anyway. What we do today now is mostly prevention with nutrition. We will inform the seniors of various health options that they have. We help them, for example, during this enrollment period with Medicare Part D and making their choices for what insurance they want to use for their medications and so on. So we're still in the health field, but now we just have another agency that has come to be. It's called Oak Street Health out of Chicago. They're building a facility on Branch Avenue, and they're going to be primary care providers. And and we kind of assist and collaborate with them. So we don't try to run a program or develop a program that we really don't need. If there's somebody else doing it, that's fine. As long as the people in the neighborhood of 20,000 people are getting the service they need, you know, we back off and let them run it. And if they're good at it, we just collaborate with them. And if there's a gap in the services for the neighborhood, then we jump in and we develop a program.
Now, you also have a daily meals program for senior citizens, and I'm wondering how many meals do you serve a day? And this include all 3 meals, or just like one a day, lunch or dinner or whatever? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we provide lunch every day at 12 noon to anyone 60 years or over and some handicapped. It varies as far as what day it is and what we're serving, but we contract with Blackstone Health, and they prepare meals at the Cranston Senior Center. They prepare actually between 2,500 and 3,000 meals a day, and then they distribute them to community centers such as ours. They also provide the Meals on Wheels at home delivery. But we will serve anywhere from 15, 20, most Wednesdays they like is the highest. We get around 35, 40 people at a meal. The Wednesdays is the highest populated because it's followed, the dinner's followed by bingo, and of course, you know, bingo's very popular. Yeah. But anyway, it all depends on what day it is and what we're serving.
Just high stakes bingo, or?
Well, we do it very quietly.
Okay,
we don't want to violate any state law.
That's right, I know. Are these meals only available to residents of the North End, or you find that people outside the North End come in too?
Anybody can come in. It's open to the public, and it's free will offering. We don't charge them anything.
Well, then how do you know how many meals? Do you call them ahead of time and say we have this many people?
They have to give us 24 hours notice.
Okay.
So that we could call in to Blackstone Health, and they could deliver an appropriate number the next day.
We have a minute left. I'm going to give you an opportunity to very quickly tell our audience about the Cambodian project that you're involved in.
Yeah, we had a big population of Cambodians in the neighborhood that settled maybe 20 years ago. And what we did was they were clamoring for us to help the people, help the people in Cambodia. And so they asked to use the center for meetings, and so they were meeting every Sunday for quite a while. Anyway, to make a long story short, I said, why don't you just form a corporation and have your own agency, which they did. They called the Wings of Hope Alliance for Cambodia. And they were they were going down there on their own dime, and they were buying rice and school supplies and mosquito nets and whatever else the need was. The government of Cambodia then, they won the confidence of the government of Cambodia. To make a long story short, the government says, we'll give you 3 acres of land if you build an orphanage.
Okay.
And so we went forward and did it for only $32,000 a year, and it's still running. It's for $32,000 a year. And I always get mad at the people who come in and say, I lost $500, $1,000, $2,000 at the casino. And I say, do you know what I could have done with that money?
Yeah.
I could have built an orphanage, for God's sakes, you know.
we want to thank you and our audience for watching this edition of State of the State, and we certainly hope that you will consider supporting the DaVinci Center in Providence.